And here now, I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna bid on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now with today's guest, your host, Chris Bear.
Welcome and good morning, everybody. This is Andy Mrnak alongside with Chris Bear here today. We're going to be hosting today's episode of America's Land Auctioneer. Thank you for joining us here on KFire 550 and, of course, your favorite radio stations and podcast streaming systems across the countryside. We got lots of people that'll listen in and chime in every week. We appreciate everybody who pays attention to Piper's version of America's Land Auctioneer. And, of course, it is brought to you and sponsored by our friends at Piper's Auction Realty and Land Management. Appreciate everybody at the across the region, as it is kind of the heavy hitting big season that we experience every year this time of year. Of course, it's November 1. We've had a good chance to wrap up a lot of the September and October auctions. We're getting close to diving into the final segment of the 2024 markets. But Chris Bear, thank you for joining us. Chris is our regional manager for Piper's regional office in Sioux Falls, out of our Worthing office just south of Sioux Falls on I-94. And of course, he's also the host of the Legacy of Agriculture, and that's the radio show and podcast streaming system that Chris does on a weekly basis here as well. So Chris, thank you for joining us here today. We got a lot of great things to talk about. How's everything handled in South Dakota?
We've had a great fall so far, Andy. It's been absolutely wonderful, and thank you for inviting me to be on America's Land Auctioneer. It's nice to work in tandem with such a great group and a great organization as the Piper's organization. It's one of the finest in the industry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, the main reason I asked you to be on here this morning, and it's a beautiful Saturday morning here in North and South Dakota, but today I want to give our listeners kind of an insight of not only what we've experienced, but what we're kind of projecting. But as we always do these programs over the summertime, and as we start getting into the fall, we're always guessing as to how the markets are going to react. We're always guessing what yields are going to start doing. We're going to start guessing how the consumer confidence level across agriculture is going to be in general as we get into our more streamlined marketing season of October and November. And now we're kind of in the middle of it, right? We're in the heat of the battle. Yep. We've been traveling the countryside. You're really beating down the bush in eastern Nebraska and South Dakota, southern Minnesota, Iowa, and can really give us maybe a different feel than what our northern listeners have become accustomed to. So I really want to give kind of a broad spectrum here, and that's kind of why we invited you to be on here today. As we always study and look at the factors that affect agriculture, not just in the upper Midwest, but across the region or across the countryside, there's always three major components and key factors, right? We're always looking and studying what's the commodity markets doing. Always studying what's interest rate doing, either short-term or long-term. And of course, how does everything affect overall net farm income? And our consumer confidence level in agriculture is all a derivative of net farm income, which is either high yields, managing expenses, government input costs, and all of the key factors that go into it. But we really don't get to see how it's affecting the market until we get into November 1, right?
Yeah, what it is it's boots on the ground right now. A lot of the crop reports won't come out. We had a lot of pre-harvest reports, but nestled right here in eastern South Dakota, I could throw a rock into Iowa from where our office is, and Minnesota is just a stone's throw away, as well as Nebraska. So we really do get a good flavor of what the market is. In our part of the world, which I call God's country, Andy, the harvest, typically we'd be on the bottom half of the harvest right now, but harvest conditions have been phenomenal for us, and most everything is done and out of the fields. The reports that we're getting back in our part of the country is that even though the commodity prices, corn and beans, are a little bit soft, and I have to say, and I have to lay a foundation, Andy, that right here in south of Sioux Falls in June and July, we were in the area that got 18 to 20 inches of rain. And so we were scared to death of a total crop failure. But after those rains subsided and the floodwaters went away, the crops just grew like crazy, and we have had a phenomenal crop.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what we're we're starting to see all the way basically across the region. We'll get into it here in a second, but as you bring up commodity prices, right now, just looking region wide, we're seeing corn cash bids as we close out October and start entering into November here this week. Obviously, next week is election season here, so election week on November 5th, and so we're always watching how the commodities are reacting to everything. All the key factors. Right now, current cash bids for corn ranging anywhere from 335 to 357 across the region. December board is looking at 412. That is down 70 cents from a year ago, November 1 of 2023. Soybeans cash bids right now 883 to 907 across the region. November board at 983, down $4.
Yeah.
Chris, that is down $4 from the November 1 bids of 2023. And of course, hard red spring wheat, more what Western North Dakota we always follow. Of course, we dabble in corn and soybeans as well, but spring wheat's still kind of our dominating market. Um, Cash price not doing so bad right now at 538 to 552 cash price across the region. Minneapolis December at 604, down 90 cents from a year ago. So manageable, but it all comes down to yields, and that's what we were just kind of touching on. This has been a really up and down kind of oddball year from east to west. In the last week, I've traveled throughout western South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, and of course, all the way across North Dakota into Minnesota in the last week. And it is amazing the difference in yields, the difference in productivity from one county to another. On the western side of the state, we struggled in the very extreme southwest corner to get a couple of inches of rain throughout the entire season. We didn't catch any of those early rains that the majority of the region, North and South Dakota, caught from April 1 until July 1. Everybody got shut off July 1, right? And
Yes.
even you guys did. And like you were talking about the 18 and 19-inch 48-hour span that you had there in June that nobody wishes on anybody. However, the timely rains that kind of come across the region were coupled with timely drought for a lot of the region. Not I'm not talking Bowman County, North Dakota, because the entire thing has been an untimely drought. But for the most part, timely drought across the region, which is overall reducing harvest costs, reducing dryer expenses. They're able to save $40-50 an acre by not having to activate those dryers. I can't imagine how much less propane is being used in the upper Midwest this year to as we wrap up corn harvest.
I was visiting with several of our dealers and talking about parts and service, and one of the things that they did say that they noticed through the harvest in dry conditions, and again our yields were up for the most part, is they didn't sell the parts and the service that they typically would as if it had been wet and rainy and heavy. That the harvest came off really well. Part sales were down because it was easier on the combines. It's easier on the machinery when the ground's dry and the crops are dry.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the one of the crops that I always look at on a dry year is how much money can you save in sugar beet harvest. I want to give all a shout out to all of our sugar beet guys on the eastern side of North Dakota and South Dakota into Minnesota. That's got to be one of the more challenging crops to get off. They're structured as to when they can have it off. They're structured as to where they can deliver it. They're structured as to how many acres they're allowed to harvest. And then if you couple that with, intense rainfall in the fall, which they've all seen, you start seeing all the tractors and the cats out there pulling the trucks through. All the trucks have those big hitches in front, and then you get a year like 2024, and nobody has to hook to a single hitch. It's got to be, it's got to take all the stress off of that crop in the world. So
Well, as you know, I have a soft spot in my heart for any of those guys that grow any of those types of crops like beets or potatoes. Being raised on a potato farm, I totally understand how tough it can be to get a crop out of the field.
yeah, without a doubt. Are you what are guys talking about in eastern South Dakota? Throughout your 4-state region, what are you seeing for yields?
We're seeing lots of 200, 225 bushel corn. The bean yields have been 40, 50. We've even heard of some 60 bushels. So It's been very good. Again, when we got the crops in the ground here and it started to rain, it was a scary time because you start to float seed. The seed doesn't sprout right. It 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 just didn't come out of the ground like what we wanted, and it was yellow, and it just did not look good. And so when it dried up, and we had reasonable temperatures, anytime we get over 100 degrees down here in our neck of the wood, Andy, we can burn a crop really, really fast. But it stayed in the high 80s, low 90s for temperature. And I think what it allowed, and I'm not an agronomist, and I'm certainly not a crop consultant, but I think what happened with our crops down here is when it got dried, the roots went down, and it stunted the growth of some of the plants that were out of the ground, and they made seed, which is what we want, right? And so that made for the perfect storm for us to have a good crop. There was some low lying areas that were completely drowned out, but generally when the low spots are drowned out, the high spots do really good, and the high spots did very, very good for us.
Were there a lot of replants in the spring, after some of those torrential rains or did it not dry up fast enough for anybody to have the opportunity to go replant some areas?
There were some spots down in our area that didn't get planted at all. But when the crops went back off, or when the dried up enough that they could get back in, they went in and planted some cover crops, some milo, and that actually produced very, very well for us down in our area. Um, there's a number of things that's really important for the economy in our part of the world is that the crops get the right amount of water at the right time. But again, because of the harvest and the timeliness of the harvest, we had several people that said usually we're harvesting at the end of Halloween, but our crops are done.
Sounds good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to our first break here today. Of course, before we come back here after the break, we want to thank all of our sponsors here today, but specifically Piper's Auction Realty and Land Management. Your team at Piper's across the upper Midwest and all of our regional offices can help you out at any upcoming land and equipment auctions. We'll be right back after this break.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Piper's Auction Realty and Land Management. Piper's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifers. Nobody does it better.
Welcome back to America's Land Auction here on this beautiful Saturday morning. Andy Mrnak sitting side by side again this morning with Chris Bear out of our Sioux Falls Regional Office, Piper Sioux Falls Regional Office out of Worthing, South Dakota. That's just a few miles south of Sioux Falls on I-29. Beautiful spot there in the middle of what Chris self-proclaimed as God's country down there in the Quad State area, servicing a huge district anymore between eastern South Dakota, southern Minnesota, of course, the entire states of Iowa and Nebraska as well. So you got quite a big territory to cover. And as we kind of wrap up what we talked about, some of the market indicators that we've seen so far into 2024, we're going to start looking at the market projections of the as we conclude 2024, get into 2025. Like I said, we're starting to get a little bit smarter now, right, Chris? So we've got some additional land auctions under our belt. We've got a lot of equipment auctions under our belt. And we've got a lot of them coming up, and now our projections are starting to get a little tighter, a little stronger as we can start seeing what these indicators are actually proven for results. And as the next segment, we'll actually talk about some of the market recap and some of the tremendous land auctions that Piper's has experienced here in the last 20 to 30 days, but specifically the last 10 days that they've been record-setting weeks here for the last couple of weeks. But as we talked about commodity prices, interest rates, and of course, yields, which and what I again believe is kind of a lower expense harvest, which always helps with consumer confidence as well. As we've seen what's happened here for the past couple of weeks in the land auctions, is we're not seeing much of a slowdown in consumer confidence when it comes to buying and putting their money into the equity or into land equity.
When it comes to the real estate side, Andy, what we're seeing is we're seeing the strength of our agriculturists. The investors don't seem to be out buying farmland like they were pre-COVID, but right now, and this pleases me, is we're seeing neighbors buying neighbors. and we're seeing that land that is being bought by neighbors. It's staying contiguous with people who are going to stay there. In some cases, I truly believe that they're probably cost averaging some of their land, which takes the sting out of maybe a little bit of high priced land. But I think that the land prices and the machinery prices in particular are going back to pre-COVID prices. If you really look at the markets and follow the interest rates, our interest rates right now are really the same as they were when we went into COVID. And so these guys are able to go back out. They've got the cash or they've got the equity in the land that they've already got, and are able to go out and participate in some of these land auctions and get stuff bought at at a decent price.
And it it's when we say we're talking about the market returning back to what pre-COVID was, we're obviously not going to get back to pre-COVID values, but it's more of a pre-COVID market, right? It's a pre-COVID market feel.
Yes,
And basically from 2020 to 2024, we've talked about it just about every chance that you and I get together. We saw this abnormal market of rallied values of high cash, in pocket cash availability, to which inevitably leads to inflation. And that's basically what,
absolutely.
what we saw. So whether it's land or equipment, everything caught a natural and inflationary value. And it wasn't normal, like you and I always talk about. It wasn't normal to buy a John Deere 8320 tractor for 130,000, use it for 4 years, put on 800 hours, and sell it for 155,000. You didn't make money utilizing a piece of equipment. Now we caught that
That's right.
inflationary value up, and now each of these items, all of your 2020 and previous models that caught that inflation value, we set a new high on it. We set a new market expectation of value, and now we're basing our depreciation off of what those markets, or off of what those values were. So we're not going to get into pre-COVID values, because John Deere 8320 tractor,
That's right.
if it was worth 110,000, it became worth 140. And now we're depreciating off of that $140,000 mark, because the replacement cost of a similar piece of equipment with however many hours in a newer model, the replacement cost and the manufacturing costs have just gone up so much.
And that really is true. And guys now are starting to get a basis to be able to make those types of calculations. For example, the custom cutters, for years they always wanted to know, hey, how much is this combine going to cost us on a per separator hour basis? And as these markets are starting to normalize, we had an extreme high during COVID, like what you talked about. There's been an extreme low that we have watched all summer long that has not been pleasant for anybody. And now in this normalization, guys are going to be able to go back out and say, hey, this combine is going to cost us $150 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever that might be. And it's going to be a lot easier to make those calculations in the future and be able to, if you need to go to the bank, if that's what your deal is, you're going to be able to go to the bank and say, hey, I need to do this update. But there's some positive things that are coming out of this as a result too, Andy, is that we have heard over the last couple of years that the cost of used machinery, has been so high that we couldn't afford to make a trade. But this, on the positive side, this is the opportunity for a end user or a producer to be able to go in and say, hey, I need to update some equipment. And it's kind of a buyer's market in a way right now. And the interest rates aren't to the point to where a guy can't afford to do an update. So there is some definite positives in the market.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think there's kind of a misnomer, especially on the equipment side. And I know we kind of drifted towards the equipment side here for a minute, but there's kind of a misnomer out there that, man, that market's really coming down. It's really coming off. And like you and I have talked about, it just really is. It's just getting into more of a normalized market. I mean, for years we depreciate equipment on an annual basis, and it's a lot better, a lot easier to manage your expectations for value. It's a lot easier to manage your expected cost per acre or input cost when you're actually in production. It's a lot easier to manage your finances when you actually have these numbers that you can base your calculations off of. And for the last 4 or 5 years, yeah, it certainly seemed good because our balance sheets went up. But if you had to replace that equipment at some point in time, you were going to, really have that extra cost involved in it. So now we're getting to that point where you can start managing your cost per hour. And I think that's important too. As we turn back to the equipment side, or to the land side actually, and what we've seen here recently is now I do believe that the finances are starting to get to where everybody can manage them. So now what you're talking about with neighbors buying some property, and we have seen that, the 15-mile radius around the around a specific tract of land is certainly garnering as much interest as the outside 15-mile radius as well. And so if your strength is coming from that, as we always say in flat country, it costs a lot of money to keep your neighbor on the other side of the hill. And so when we have some of these land auctions, especially when it comes to really good productive land and strong lands that we're seeing really good strong soils on it, and we're going to touch on some of those sales that we've seen in Divide County and Lemoore County and in western North Dakota as October has kind of come to an end. Um, some of these values have really seen a lot of strength, and it has to do with the consumer confidence. It has to actually do with the lack of confidence across the rest of your investing opportunities. Where else are you going to put your money where you have as much confidence and security in your investment as you do with agricultural land?
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about land, and I know Kevin has talked about this a lot on his show, is that there isn't any more land. Somebody can't pick up your land and take it. You can't change it unless residential real estate takes, unless you're near an area where it's going to be taken over by the natural growth of the city. But as a rule of thumb, land is and always will be a great investment.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's where we're, the beautiful part of what we do and what we see on a daily basis, Chris. You and your team in South Dakota, in extreme southeast portion of South Dakota, my team in Southwest North Dakota, and then the rest of our Piper's auction team that's scattered throughout the Upper Midwest, everywhere between you and me, and across the eastern side of North Dakota and Minnesota as well. We've got a couple of new staff members that we're going to start introducing here in the next couple of weeks here as well. So a lot of exciting things happening in the markets, a lot of exciting things happening right here at Pipers. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors as we conclude our second segment, and we'll start getting into kind of a market recap as when we come back from our break. But we definitely want to thank all of our team members here at Pipers Auction Realty and Land Management. There's been a lot of great land management properties that have been coming up on the market here. So pay attention to pipers.com. You can see all of our upcoming land management, and equipment auctions throughout all of the upper Midwest at pipers.com. Contact any Pipers representative for any questions in your area. We'll be right back after this break.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pipers Auction Realty and Land Management. Pipers offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifers. Nobody does it better.
Welcome back to America's Land Auctioneer. I'm Andy Mrnak, your host for this fine Saturday morning. And of course, sitting side by side with Chris Bear, our regional manager out of our Sioux Falls office. And, Chris, your team down there, you guys seem to be getting a lot done, got a lot of exciting sales coming up. Now, as we kind of wrap up today's show a little bit, we just crossed the halfway point. We've talked about the market indicators, the economic indicators of what we're seeing across the country in agriculture. We've always also talked about kind of what our projections are through the balance of 2024. Starting to seem like we're going to maintain a steady to even stronger market than probably expected. And on the equipment side, I think we're looking for as strong of a market as we can expect on that side too. So our sellers are definitely entering the market with confidence. Our consumers or buyers are definitely entering the market with confidence. And it seems that regardless of all the outside outlying conditions that everybody would expect to start seeing this stuff push the other direction, there still seems to be a lot of just overall general strength in the markets and overall confidence.
100%, Andy. One of the things that we saw this summer was we saw some prices that were pretty tough on sellers when it comes to the machinery side. The land auctions continued to be fairly strong throughout the summertime, and there seems to be an uptick this fall. We're seeing some land prices down here in our part of the country on I-20 down the I-29 corridor that are very strong, not record breaking, but very, very strong. And buyers that seem to have a lot of strength in the market that are pushing those prices, particularly at the land auctions.
Now, for a lot of our listeners, they may not know what value is, and I hate this question. I hate it when somebody comes asking me and says, "Hey, what's cropland worth?" Right? But just give us an idea of kind of southeast South Dakota. What is 75 pi, 100% tillable land with good access? What is that worth south and east of Sioux Falls?
Well, down here in Sioux Falls, we've got some unique crop ground because we're fairly close to the Sioux River. We're not very far off from the Missouri River, so we get in spots we get some really good black heavy farm ground, and it all depends on soil composition. It depends on the production indexes, but we can see some farm ground down in our area 13, 14, $15,000 an acre if it's got the right soil composition and if it's got the right production indexes and it's got the right history. Right now, we're enjoying some of the strongest pasture ground prices that we have seen in many years. Pasture ground that has never been row crop that we're seeing that might even have rocks in it, might not be quite as desirable in that $5,000-6,000 an acre area, which is completely unheard of in our area. Just on the east side of the river, from where our offices, our Piper Sioux Falls office is on I-29, if you go directly to the east, um, to you guys, I out in the west and up to the north, I know that this is a little bit surprising, but a couple of years ago, we were seeing land prices in that 25 to $30,000 an acre range. Now that's a lot. That's a lot different story on the east side of the river because they have both Lyon and Sioux County in Iowa have the largest animal population of any counties in the state of Iowa, and so their input costs are not as high as they are on the west side of the river, and so they're able to take from those highly populated animal areas. They're able to go back and apply waste in the fall and avoid some of those really high fertilizer costs. And Iowa makes them, and the feds make them have a manure management plan that drives some of the value of that land. It's a great place to be.
Well, the reason I brought up that portion of it because I want to do a complete flip because we're going to talk about the Western Dakota land auctions that we had in October. So I want everybody
All right.
to have have an idea of the broad range of experience and expertise that we have to have within Piper's Auction and Realty. But if you look at what your markets are doing, and then we have a lot of we're showing a lot of strength on the western side of the state, but they are completely different numbers. Western Dakota auction again this year. This is our 19th annual Western Dakota land auctions. Tremendous sale. I think we did 13 auctions in 3 days. Sold a little over 9,000 acres across the region, the upper Midwest region here. And I tell you what, it's just a tremendous sale that we put on each and every year. It started off with a bang. We sold some land just north of Belfield on Highway 85, and the land realized a value of $3,000 and $3,100 per acre respectively on two different half sections, and really good productivity. But in comparison to some of the other ground that is being offered, maybe south of Dickinson or on the opposite side of Stark County, you know, maybe not as productive as that area, but what it shows is that general region, and we always say location, right? That general region is has as strong of a demand for land as anywhere probably in the state of North Dakota. So you can hardly ever guess what the land market's going to do in that portion of Billings and Stark County on the western side of Stark County or throughout Billings County because land just doesn't come up available all the time. And so there's just a lot of pent up demand and a lot of really strong producers, and they're very progressive in that area. So we really had the ability to start the week off with a bang. Lots of great sales in between. We offered some property down here in Bowman County as well. Expected value somewhere in that 11 to 1300 range. Sold for 1375 for a really nice section of cropland there as well. And then we capped off one of our premier sales of the fall. And when you start talking about grazing land, Chris, you were talking about $5,000 an acre. We sold 5,000 acres of grassland, basically 100% grassland. Had a couple hundred acres of hay ground mixed in the middle of it there, but basically 100% grassland in the extreme south to southeast corner of Harding County, South Dakota, straight east of the metropolis of Reddig, population 2. And for that property to average 940 across the board was really, really showing a lot of strength in the market in that portion of South Dakota.
Well, and you got to keep in mind is and sometimes when you're comparing land clear out west, you've got such a huge difference in elevation, growing season. Our growing season is very, very conducive to uh, making good crops, where your guys' growing season can be 30, 45 days shorter than our growing season can too. So that makes a huge difference in value as well.
Yeah, and overall production, I mean, obviously we're dealing with a little more clay soils, a little harder pan soils. It's just a different world in productivity. Basically, all stems from rainfall. Again, this portion of the world was probably sub 5 inches of rain basically all year. You guys are in the excess of 30 inches of rain probably through the growing season of 2024. So a lot of difference in the market, and that's what makes the land business so fun in the upper Midwest is the
Yeah.
extremes from what we see in the Badlands to across the center portion, from Bismarck to Pierre, and then what we see throughout the entire Red River Valley of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. Um, that was the Western Dakota land auctions, and really, really a tremendous event there. It happens the second week of pheasant hunting season each and every year. Next year's going to be kind of a marquee moment. It'll be our 20th anniversary. 20th anniversary. It's hard to believe that some of us have been in the business that long, Chris. But we're excited to see what we're going to do for the Western Dakota land auctions in 2025. If you have a couple of properties you want to participate with it in, give us a call. The last couple of weeks also, we had kind of what I would consider a record-breaking week in McKenzie and Divide County, North Dakota. So that's the extreme northwest corner of North Dakota, and the extreme northwest corner. Part of the property was north of Ambrose, which puts the land basically anywhere from a mile to a half a mile away from the Canadian border. And a lot of property up there over the past few years has seen an extreme run of land value. When I first got into that part of the world in probably 2012, 2013, we were selling a lot of properties up there, $1,300 to $1,500 an acre. I remember the first time I sold one that was on the Canadian border, it brought $2,100 an acre, and that was kind of a head turner at that time. Chris, this land, the first couple of parcels that went out the door, topped out at $4,500 an acre. 4,500, almost 3 times what the land value was in what I'm going to say 2012, 2013. Really, really good land. Again, you're just kind of running into that area where there's a lot of progressive farmers. The land doesn't come up very often. There's a lot of pent up demand, and they're really good. I mean, those guys they can have some 70 to 90 bushel wheat yields up in that part of the world, and it's absolutely impressive to see what they can do on a growing season that I would say is 45 days shorter than yours, Chris.
I'm a huge history buff, Andy. I absolutely love agricultural history, and I want to take just one step back in history. 100 years ago, this land that you're selling for $4,000 and $4,500 an acre, 100 years ago, would it have sold for $100 an acre?
No, not even close. Not even close.
What
So
would it have sold for? Do you have any history on that?
no, I would say 100 years ago, you're probably looking at the teens, if that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably 1950s. I say you're probably looking at 30 to $45 an acre, and then so on and so forth from that point on. But to wrap up kind of our discussion on the market recap, really what was kind of the highlight of what I'm going to say of all of October was a sale that just happened here this last week, and that was in Lemoore County. There was 1,957 acres. I'm just going to give you the straight up stats on it, Chris. The first 5 parcels were selected off the board at $9,675 an acre. That was just right outside the city of Dickey, North Dakota, southeast North Dakota. So I just wanted to give kind of a southwest side, northwest market recap, as well as the southeast market recap, to give kind of an overall broad spectrum what happened in North Dakota. But that averaged right at $7,500 an acre across the board, on 1,957 acres. Really, really just showing the strength of the market with good quality cropland. We're not seeing any reduction in value. That's going to bring us to our next commercial break here, ladies and gentlemen. Want to thank everybody for listening to us on this Saturday morning. I'm Andy Mrnak, your host for this Saturday with Chris Bear. He's our regional manager out of our Sioux Falls regional office, with some upcoming sales coming up here, and we're going to talk about that right after this break. We want to thank all of our sponsors at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management throughout the upper Midwest. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction Realty and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffer's.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Welcome back to America's Land Auctioneer. I'm your host this Saturday morning, Andy Mrnak, Pfeiffer's regional manager on the western side of North Dakota, equipment manager across the upper Midwest for Pfeiffer's Auction Realty and Land Management. We have a lot of great sales to talk about. Obviously, we just saw what has happened in the market here for the past month, Chris. Again, sitting side by side with Chris Bear out of our Sioux Falls regional office in Worthing, South Dakota. Chris, we have got a record number of auctions booked through November, December, and into 2024, or sorry, to 2025 rather. But really none more impressive than what we're going to talk about coming up here, Chris. And we're just going to dive right into it here on the upcoming sales throughout the upper Midwest. Obviously, I think there's about 45 auctions in the entire month of November for Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty, and a lot of good sales in the northeast corner of the state of North Dakota. We got 320 acres in Grand Forks County, 410 acres in McIntosh County, 640 acres back to Dickey County again, and then 290 acres in Stutzman County. But I tell you what, on November 11th, and this is going to be a big week for Pfeiffer's throughout the upper Midwest in Minnesota, North Dakota, and of course down into your portion of South Dakota as well. On November 11th, that's a Monday, we are offering 2,904 acres in Ottertail, Wilkin, and Grant County, Minnesota. This is part of our retirement sale. This is a package sale. We've got the land auction coming up on November 11th. And then, of course, we're going to follow up with the Gillespie Family Farm Partnership, and that's a farm retirement sale that is going to be offered here in December. We're just in the middle of finishing up our inventory for that sale. But I tell you what, you're not going to find a more impressive package of land and equipment anywhere. I'm not talking about Minnesota, Chris. I'm talking about the United States of America. This is pretty of a package of equipment coupled with some of the best land that you're ever going to have an opportunity for. And that is tied up right there in Ottertail, Wilkin, and Grant County. On December, I'm going to get to where I can kind of wheel through. We're just finished our inventory here up in the last 24 hours, actually. Probably one of the most impressive farm sites you're ever going to have an opportunity to walk on. We're going to do a live auction, Chris. You and I believe we're advocates of the live auction still. Most of our competition is really pressing for the online only. I'm going to call that the lazy method here, but I tell you what, we're going to do this one as a live auction coupled with simulcast online bidding. And what we're finding out here is the momentum of the live sale is still unparalleled and unmatched. So when we have a line of equipment such as the Gillespie Farms Partnership Farm Retirement Auction, we want to engage that crowd as much as possible and allow you all to come and sit and walk through and visit about the equipment, listen to it run, see it in person, get your hands on it, because it really is, for the age of it, is probably as well taken care of or meticulous of a line of equipment as you're ever going to find. We got a 2014 4430 Patriot sprayer. We got a 9620 RX 4-Trax tractor, 2018 580 quad track, a 2018 540 quad track, 2011 485 quad track, 2012 450 quad track, 2009 485 quad track, a couple other tractors. We got an 8230 John Deere front wheel tractor, and some other Case IH tractors just to kind of wrap this line up as well. We got a pair of 2014 9230 combines on tracks, showing right at 2,000 separator hours on them. And we got some yellow iron with we've got an excavator. There's a John Deere 750K dozer with 7,000 hours on it, Chris. And I tell you what, it looks like it came out of the factory floor yesterday.
Those guys, the Gillespie family up in that part of the country, they were meticulous farmers. Well, not only were they good landowners and took good care of their land, but they were excellent, did an excellent job taking care of their machinery. That's going to be a great sale, Andy, and something that the whole upper Midwest is going to be watching very carefully.
I think we're going to see a lot of pent-up demand in this kind and quality of equipment, throughout the nation on it. With the there's a trio of 2023 Timty hopper trailers. There's a trio of semis that your Kenworth trucks You just can't find them any prettier and better taken care of than this. The fun part about not only dealing with the Gillespie family here and understanding how particular they are about absolutely everything. There's 6 or 7 phenomenal buildings, cold storage shops, all concrete throughout the entire yard. I mean, it's just absolutely impressive. But not only are the owners that way, but every single person that works on that in that operation, from Jared, who's basically the farm manager, to Troy Johnsrud, who's been helping him manage his equipment line, and then everybody else that works in the shop on how absolutely meticulous they are when it comes to maintenance, to the dime on the hour, making sure that everything is absolutely in perfect running condition because they can't afford to be broke down. Absolutely
Right.
cannot afford it. So they make sure that this equipment is just in pristine shape. The first day we walked into there, we didn't have to wait for anybody to go clean something up. Everything is washed, parked, put away, shedded. Basically, 100% of the equipment, even the tillage equipment, you're going to find in sheds all right here in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. But I tell you what, just this package of the farmland throughout again Otter Tail, Wilkin, and Grant County, 2,904 acres, going to be offered next week, actually November 11th. Going to be offered November 11th, and it's certainly going to be a sale for the record book, and across the board as productive of land as you're going to find. Chris, I also want to give you a few minutes to talk about the upcoming regional auctions that we have. The first one's going to be in Steele, North Dakota, coming up here in November. That's actually the following day on November 12th. But then you've got some land and equipment auctions coming up right after that, and then your equipment sale in December.
Sure. I'm going to dive into that. I want to say one more thing about this Gillespie farm equipment auction that you got, Andy. I've always said that there's three things that make for a successful auction. One is the reputation of the seller, the guy that you're selling for, or our client as an auction company. Number two is the quality of the equipment that you're selling. And number three, the auction company that you hire to do the auction. And part of hiring the right auction company, Andy, is having the right set of tools in the toolbox. And you hit it on the head. These live auctions, you never want to take that away because we want to have that live auction. We want to have that momentum, and we want people to come and see what they're bidding on. But I appreciate you giving us a shout out on our machinery auction that we coming up on December the 3rd. We're just 30 days away from that auction. We've already got 700 lots under contract that's coming into our yard. We're actually running out of room here in our yard. We're anticipating probably around 1,000 items that we're going to be selling on December the 3rd. And the nice thing about what we're doing here, Andy, first of all, it's going to be a live auction with simulcast bidding. Second of all, we're going to have free coffee and donuts for the first people through the door. And the third thing is rain, snow, wind, which that's probably what we're going to get on that day. Is it's going to be inside of our climate controlled theater right here south of Sioux Falls. So you can sit in climate controlled live auction, bid right off the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of our regional facilities is set up that way. And kind of one thing that we were talking about on the Gillespie sale coming up in December, we were worried about that there too. We're actually going to clean out and utilize their updated and heated shop. And that's we're gonna host that auction indoors as well. So come join us. We always find a way to make it comfortable for the bidders and buyers. A couple of days after the Gillespie sale, obviously we got the upcoming Steel equipment auction. Lots of great items in that sale as well. Late model tractors, lots of semis and vehicles. You can see that right on I-94, just east of Bismarck on exit 200. Join us. That's going to be on November 12th. Lots of great items there. That's going to be a 2-day auction on November 12th. But on the 13th, I believe I'm coming down to Lincoln County, down into your part of the neck of the woods and your part of the world there, Chris. Tell us about the 60-acre tract down in Lincoln County.
We've got just over 61 acres that we're selling in Lincoln County, just outside of Sioux Falls. That has been in pasture ground for many, many years. It's being broke and getting ready for cropland. But don't forget, on November the 5th, we are going to be up in Kingsbury County in South Dakota selling 160 acres of pasture ground that's got easements. A great piece of property as well.
You bet. We also have 1,000 acres coming up in Bowman County. We've got 600 acres in Slope County. And I tell you what, those two Southwest North Dakota auctions are going to be fantastic. They're on November 19th. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this edition of America's Land Auctioneer, brought to you by Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. We'll talk to you next week. In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bear, sponsored by Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pfeiffer's at 605-836-2277.